My name is Ron Kool. I'm one of the pastors here at Hillside. Welcome to all of you. Welcome to those of you who are joining us online. Once again, this morning we're going to continue to work through 1 Chronicles. And again, if we can get the house lights up here, I'd like to be able to see people. All right? Can we get them up a little bit? They'll be coming up, I'm sure. But 1 Chronicles, and as we said from the beginning, the main purpose of the book of Chronicles is that the Chronicles was written. Chronicles was written to give God's people hope, okay? It was written at a time when the people did not have a lot of hope, when they were struggling, when they were going through some really difficult times. The fact is, when Chronicles was written, when the chronicler writes, Israel has no king, has no army, has basically no power. They had been in exile, and they've come out of exile. They've come back to Jerusalem. They've come back to the land, but they don't have a king. They're still under control of foreign powers. They don't have a lot of resources. They're weak, and they feel ineffective. And it's a feeling that every Christian has known at one time or another, right? When we're fighting against something, whether it's a sin that we just can't seem to get over, or a relationship that's broken and we want to bring healing to it, when we're dealing with injustices and racism and these things, big things, little things, we all know what it's like to feel like we just don't have what it takes. We just don't have the resources, right? We don't have the strength to make this different. We don't have the strength to go on. We don't have the strength to try to change anything. The people of Israel knew that. And that's why the chronicler wants to give them an extremely important message. And it is extremely important for us in our day as well. As we think about living and being faithful to God in this, what we need to remember, and this is the heart of the message this morning, I want to make sure you get it, is that it's never been about our power. It's never been about our power. That's what we so often do. We look at the challenges we face. We look at the difficulties that are in front of us. We look at our own resources and we say, I'm in trouble. That's never been the case for God's people. It's never been about our power. It's never will be about our power. It's always been about God's power. And the chronicler wants to remind us of that. He wants to show us that whenever Israel flourished, it was because God was the one who was active, all right? And so he does that by telling us another story from David. We're actually going to cover 3 chapters this morning, so we're going to move kind of fairly quickly. They're shorter chapters, but we're going to move through them fairly quickly. If you were with us last week, you know David got to a certain place in his life and he wanted to build a temple, right? He was living in a palace and God was living in a tent. The ark was in a tent. So, God, I want to build you a temple. I want to do this. And God said, no, thank you. God says, no, it's not your job to do that. David's job was to bring security and peace to God's people. And in chapter 17, God makes this promise. 1 Chronicles 17, verse 9, God says, I will provide a place for my people Israel, and I will plant them so that they can have a home of their own and no longer be disturbed. God says, I am going to give my people a home. And what we're going to see today is God building that home through David and making Israel secure. And it's just amazing to see. And it just, we sung a lot of songs this morning about God's power, right? And how amazing it is. This is one of those times when the Bible wants to say, just watch, okay? Just watch. We're going to begin, and we have to have some geography here because we're going to be talking about battles and wars. And I want to start with a bigger picture here, all right? This is a bigger map than we usually use. This is the Mediterranean. You can see the Greece is there in the upper left, the country, not a spot of Greece, but the country is upper left. A couple things you need to know. Whenever you think Bible times, think Nile River, okay? That's where Egypt was. It just followed the Nile River, and the Nile is essential to Old Testament and understanding the Old Testament. This next part I want to show you is the Red Sea, which was important, and even probably more important in our day, right? And the reason the Red Sea was important is that you can see it connects down to the Indian Ocean down there at the bottom, right? So you had trade lines. You could ship things down that way. And so controlling the Red Sea is important. The Euphrates River is up here at the top. The Tigris is next to it. Right, the Euphrates River is important because along the Euphrates River, we get Babylon, Assyria, all those nations are in that area. And again, they have access through the Persian Gulf. Again, huge issues in our day today as well, right? Access to those places. So this map of sort of the Middle East and so on, where's Israel? Israel's right there. And you can hardly see it, right? It's just not much. And this is about the size Israel was at the time when the chronicler writes, but it's also about the time the size Israel was when David became king. At the end of Saul's reign, they had gained territory in Saul's reign, then they lost territory in Saul's reign. And Israel is just this itty-bitty place in the midst of large and powerful kingdoms. We're going to zoom in on this section. We're going to catch the Euphrates River to the top. We're going to catch the top of the Red Sea at the bottom, all right? So we do this. You see the Red Sea, the Euphrates. Jerusalem is right here. So this is what Israel is like. This is where we start, and you're going to see how we grow. We're going to see how God gets busy, how God is active with all of this, all right? So the first thing David does is he begins to expand some of the territory. Begins to expand some of the territory that had been Israel, all right? So he takes this section east of the Jordan, down by the Amalekites to the south. He takes care of those before he even gets chapter 18, all right? So we'll make those part of Israel. They're that color. They're that part of the group. And then there's this area up here where Tyre is, okay? And Tyre was an ally. They were a group that David had worked with, and so he's got them. In fact, a lot of people believe that Hiram, the king of Tyre, actually was a God follower. Okay, that he had converted and become a follower of God. So that's where we start really in chapter 18, okay? And this is what happens. In the course of time, David defeated the Philistines and subdued them. And he took Gath and its surrounding villages from the control of the Philistines. Whenever you're in Gath, think Goliath, okay? You're just missing the O-L-I. Gath, Goliath, that's where he's from. And whenever somebody in the Old Testament thought about Gath, they thought about giants, they thought about Goliath. And if you remember, Goliath was David's first battle. David went and he defeated Goliath. And so it starts, and we're going to see chapter 20, the last battle is going to be against somebody from Gath as well. It's kind of a bookend there, all right? So this is where Philistia was. This is where the Philistines were. This is where Gath was. Boom. And watch how it's just like defeated, subdued. They have become subject, and so we'll make them this color, all right? Hopefully you can see the differences in the colors there, all right? So those nations are subject, okay? So David had gone to the west. He's taking care of that. Now he's going to go to the east. David also defeated the Moabites, and they became subject to him and brought him tribute. Moab, boom, defeated. It's all we're told. David just came in and he won, and they brought him tribute. We're going to make a list of this, all right? David's spoils of war. We're going to see that David gets all kinds of stuff, because when God moves, and God takes care of everything, and all this stuff is going to be ready for the temple. And so we know, we're told later on, he got silver and gold from the Moabites, and we also know, we're told later on, he got silver and gold from the Philistines, okay? So David is getting wealthy, and Israel is expanding. Their home is becoming more comfortable. All right, now David's going to go to the north. Moreover, David defeated Hadadezer, king of Zobah, in the vicinity of Hamath, when he went up to set up his monument at the Euphrates River. All right, here's Zobah. It's to the north there. The king of Zobah goes up to the Euphrates River. He's trying to win that territory, okay? While he's gone, David comes back and said, oop, you know nothing. All right, he defeats them. David captured 1,000 of his chariots, 7,000 charioteers, and 20,000 foot soldiers. And so now David's got in his war chest, in his spoils of war, 1,000 chariots, 27,000 soldiers. Now, when the Arameans, they're right next to, I'll show them to you in a minute, of Damascus came to help Hadadezer, king of Zobah, David struck down 22,000 of them. So, Zobah's fighting, they're losing. King of Aram, and these are often made of little kingdoms and cities and so on. King of Aram says, all right, I'm going to come and fight with you. And they get defeated. So David put garrisons in the Aramean kingdom of Damascus, and the Arameans became subject to him, and they brought him tribute, all right? And so now we've got all this territory. And it's just like, right? I mean, we're only up to verse, 5, 6, something like that? I mean, it's just amazing. David is just boom, 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 all right? And we got tribute now from Aram to add to our list, okay? So here's where we are, and then we come to the first time we get the song chorus, okay? This chapter has two choruses, or one chorus that's repeated twice. And this is, again, the key thing. These are the key words from chapter 18. What the chronicler wants to say. And think of it again. He's talking to people who are weak and who don't have a lot of power. And he's talking about how David is just exploding. And he says this. He said, the Lord gave David victory wherever he went. The Lord gave David victory. It wasn't David. It was the Lord who gave him victory. It's never about our power. It's always about God's power. And we need to remember that. We need to remember that. And I think it would change things so much in our spirits and the way we treat others if we recognized it's not about our power. So often we fall into that trap of saying, you know what, I have to control this. I have to be in. No, I don't. It's about God's power. He'll do what he wants when he wants. And if we as Christians could live with that attitude, if we could recognize that it will be made beautiful in his time, I think we'd start to be amazing witnesses in our world. Okay, I'll come back to that. So David took the gold shields carried by the officers of Hadadezer and brought them to Jerusalem. All right, we got more booty. All right, from Teba and Kun, towns that belonged to Hadadezer, David took a great quantity of bronze, which Solomon used to make the bronze sea, the pillars and various bronze articles. So again, David's using all this. It's all going to become part of the temple. It's all going to become part of the temple, all right? Gold shields and so on. Now we got another battle to the north. When king of Hamath, heard that David had defeated the entire army of Hadadezer, king of Zobah. Actually, I was wrong. We don't have another battle here. All right, so here's Hamath up there. And they're, again, an enemy. But when he hears that David had defeated Zobah, Hadadezer, the king of Zobah there, well, he kind of put two and two together and realized he needed to make friends with David. And so he sent his son Hadadoram to King David to greet him and congratulate him on his victory in battle over Hadadezer, who had been at war with two. So those two nations have been at war. David defeats Zobah. And Hamath is saying, thank you. Hadoram brought all kinds of articles of gold, of silver, and of bronze. And so Hamath becomes a bringer of gifts. And he's not quite subject, but basically David has control of that area as well. And so you see just an amazing amount of territory that is here, all right? It's just phenomenal the way that David has done this. So he brings gifts, and we add that to our categories. We add the gold, silver, and bronze from Hamath. Verse 11, King David dedicated these articles to the Lord. He has done with the silver and gold he had taken from all these nations, Edom and Moab, the Ammonites, the Philistines, and Amalek, all right? So now we get silver and gold from Edom. You get all this stuff, right? All of this. And again, a key important part here. All of this, what did David do with it? He dedicated it to the Lord. Right? It was all just for God. It was not, David did not keep stuff for himself. It was simply saying, God, you gave me the victory, right? If you ask David why he did that, he said, the Lord gave me victory wherever I went. It wasn't like I was fighting brilliantly. In all these, we're never told how big David's armies are. We're never told how many soldiers David has, because if we understand it, it doesn't matter how much power we have. It does not matter how strong I am. What matters is how strong God is. And that is biblical faith, recognizing, you know what, it's not. And so I don't need to, part of what that means, so I say it's so important, I don't need to, whether I'm in a political battle, a lot of those going on, I don't need to cheat. I don't need to grab extra resources to make sure that I have enough power. I don't need to manipulate people to make sure I have enough resources to win my next battle. The battle belongs to the Lord. The battle is not mine. It belongs to the Lord. So David's all the way to the north, to the Euphrates River. Now he's going to conquer to the south. Abishai, son of Zeruiah, struck down 18,000 Edomites in the Valley of Salt. Again, all we get is a general from David's army, and he just defeats Edom. He put garrisons in Edom, and all the Edomites became subject to David. So now we have down to the Red Sea, all right? So David has this amazing connection up to the Euphrates River, down to the Red Sea. And this is along a huge trading route, okay? David has great access, great wealth. And again, just these easy victories. In so many ways it is. But it's because the Lord is fighting, right? The next verse is the repeat of the chorus. The Lord gave David victory wherever he went. Exact same words, exact same phrase. The Lord gave David victory wherever he went. It's not about our power. It's about God's power. Okay? We're just called to be faithful. It's all I have to be in the midst of all those challenges. Say, God, when you choose, I know you will do this. David reigned over all Israel. He not only took care of those nations and grew the kingdom, he reigned over all Israel, doing what was just and right for all his people. Not just some, all of his people. The rest of chapter 18 just talks a little bit about some internal things, so we're going to skip over that. You notice there's kind of one piece to the puzzle missing here. In chapter 19 now deals with this, and into chapter 20, that we got to slow down a little bit here because we're going to deal with specifically one more country, and that's Ammon, okay? Ammon is right next door to Israel there. And I made them brown, gold, whatever color it shows up as back there. I made them that color because they're not an ally. They're not like Phoenicia, where Tyre and Hiram. They're not an ally at that level, but they're a friend. For some reason, the king of Ammon had shown some kindness to David, maybe let him hide out when Saul was trying to kill him. But the king of Ammon had showed kindness to David, and David wanted to show kindness to him. And so they had a good relationship, and David does not try to conquer them, okay? I think it's worth noting that. David does not go out of his way. He's willing to live with this. He's willing to say, this is what God has given me and called me to. Fortunately, the king of Ammon died. In the course of time, Nahash, king of the Ammonites, died, and his son succeeded him as king. David thought, I will show kindness to Hanun, son of Nahash, because his father showed kindness to me. Again, we don't know exactly what it was, but I will show him kindness. So David sent a delegation to express his sympathy to Hanun concerning his father. So they would assume a state funeral of some sort. David sends envoys. David sends a delegation to go bring his sympathy, to go bring his words of peace. And I think this is important for us, and here's why. I think we need to recognize, sometimes we say, well, the Old Testament was about war and physical conquering and so on, and the New Testament is different. It's not. I think what we see here is a biblical principle. Paul talks about it in Romans 12, verse 18, where Paul says this, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. And I think David was there trying to live at peace with the people of Ammon. He was not trying, he could have conquered them. He was on a roll. He could, but no, I don't want to. His goal was not to win the battles and fight and force people into subjection. His goal was ultimately to draw people by attractiveness to worship the true God. That's our job as Christians, okay? Our calling as Christians is not to defeat our enemies. Our calling as Christians is not to mess up the people around us. Our call is to live at peace and invite them to experience the peace that we have through Jesus Christ. And I think that's what David is trying to do here, but it's not going to work. When David's envoys come to Hanun in the land of the Ammonites to express sympathy to him, the Ammonite commanders said to Hanun, so now this is his advisors, do you think David is honoring your father by sending envoys to you to express sympathy? Do you think that's really, what are David's real motives here? Okay, what is David really trying to do here? Having his envoys come to you only to explore and spy out the country and overthrow it. These are spies. They're not sympathy people, they're spies. That's why they're here. And so we have to do something about it. We have to confront them. We have to kick them out. So Hanun seized David's envoys, and he does three things. First of all, he shaved them. In that day and age, and it's certainly not true today, but in that day and age, a beard for a man was a sign of manliness. It was a sign of virility. Doesn't mean anything today, okay? Just because I can't grow a beard, I'm still a man. But anyway, so to shave off a guy's beard was basically to say, you're not a real man. Now, Samuel says they shaved off half the beard. I don't know what they did, but they did enough that this was embarrassing to this guy, to these envoys, to this group. Shaved them off, and that, again, would have been terribly embarrassing. And now we're going to be mature with this next one. And then what they did is they cut off their garments at the buttocks. I originally thought it was just like a square that they did that, but from what I understand, the best that they could guess is that they kind of made a super mini skirt above a mini skirt and just cut off their robes from there down. And it was embarrassing for them. It was shaming them. It was humiliating them. Again, for a guy he's just there, all right? And so they cut off the clothes at the buttocks, and then they send them away. And these guys sneak their way back into Israel, and they try to get away. David hears about it. When David was told about this, he sent messengers to meet the men, for they were greatly humiliated. The king said, stay at Jericho until your beards have grown back, and then you can come back. The Ammonites somehow get word that David is not happy with them. And he's not just saying, oh no, I'm cowering here. No, when the Ammonites realized that they had become obnoxious to David, a stench in his nostril is kind of the literal reading of that. They'd become a stench in David's nostrils. Hanun and the Ammonites sent 1,000 talents of silver. And every time I read this week, I went ahead. I sent 1,000 talents of silver to David to say, we're really sorry. No. No, they doubled down. They didn't do that. They doubled down. They sent 1,000 talents of silver to hire chariots and charioteers from Aram Naharaim, Aram Makkah, and Zobah, okay? So these nations that have already been subjected to David, they still must have some of their armies. They still must have it. And so the king of Ammon pays 1,000 talents of silver in order to involve these nations in this battle, all right? And Aram there and Zobah there, he wants to get their soldiers. They hired 32,000 chariots and charioteers. Okay, so again, we don't get an idea of how many army people David had. We know that Israel was basically, they didn't have chariots. You might say, well, he captured 1,000 of them. Well, one thing we're told, I didn't read it, but we're told that David actually disabled some of the horses so they couldn't pull chariots, okay? I think David wants to say, this ain't about our power, okay? This is not about our power. We don't care if we have 100 chariots against 32,000 chariots, okay? It doesn't matter because it's not about our power. And so these chariots, this is a one-sided battle. And then they added, as well as the king of Makkah with his troops who came and camped near Medeba, while the Ammonites were mustered from their towns and moved out for battle, all right? So we got 3 different places that are sending troops into Ammon from up here. They're all subject to, they all want to get rid of David, right? The one thing they know is, I mean, this is Eastern Europe and Russia, right? They're trying to get rid of them, okay? And the people from Ammon, they're also gathering together, all right? So David, don't know if David goes, we know Joab is the general in charge, all right? So Joab brings the armies of Israel across. And what he ends up with here is he ends up realizing he's got a 2-front battle. Okay, he's got the Arameans to the north, and he's got the Ammonites to the west and to the south, okay, or to the east and to the south. All right, he's got a 2-front battle. So Joab says to his brother Abishai, "You take half the soldiers and you fight over there. You fight against the Ammonites. I'll take the other half and I'll go fight against the Aramites." All right. I'll go fight against them, you fight against them. If I get in trouble, you help me. You get in trouble, I'll help you. And then he says these words, key words for chapter 19. All right, this is it. This is the key words for chapter 19. He says, "Be strong and let us fight bravely for our people in the cities of our God. The Lord will do what is good in his sight." This gives us our marching direction. This is what God's people are called to do. We are called to fight bravely. We are called to fight against sin. We are called to fight against injustice. We are called to fight, and we are called to fight bravely. I'll say it now. I'll say it again at the end. We are not called to win. As Christians, I think the biggest problem we have right now in our culture is we think we are called to win. We are called to win the culture wars. We are called to win. We are not called to win. We are called to fight bravely. And as Joab says, the Lord will do what is good in his sight. It's not about our power. The battle belongs to the Lord. And we need to get that straight, friends. Because the fact is, sometimes we can win battles, but we lose the war. Because we're more worried about winning than just fight. We are called to fight bravely. So Joab and all of his troops with him advanced to fight the Arameans, and they fled. They're just gone, all right? So all these armies, they turn around and they head up, okay? And then what happens is when the Ammonites realize that the Arameans were fleeing, so the Arameans are all gone, the Ammonites realize they're fleeing, they too fled before his brother Abishai went inside the city. Again, so we have this battle where they hole up in the city, and the city has walls. And so Joab goes back to Jerusalem. You'd think they'd be smart enough to know. But no, this time it's the king of Aram, okay? The king of Aram who says, all right, I have got to get done with David. I have got to be done with this, whatever you want to call him. I got to finish this off. And so what he does is, in a sense, this is the equivalent, I think, of going nuclear. He calls in soldiers from across the Euphrates. He calls in the big guns, okay? He brings them down. He joins them up with his own people and so on. And they go into Ammon, and they're ready to fight. Again, the Ammonites surround the city, or they have their forces gathered there as well. And this time David leads the battle, and he brings them there. And all we're told is the people from across the Euphrates, that they fled before Israel. Again, they just took off. No description of battle, because the battle belongs to the Lord, right? They fled before Israel, and they took off, And they went back that way, all right? And David goes back home again. Now, this time he goes back home because it's fall. And you don't besiege a city over the winter because they're all inside in their houses and you're in the fields and you're freezing to death, okay? So they went home and they waited until the next spring. Chapter 20. In the spring, at the time when kings go off to war, Joab led out the armed forces. He laid waste the land of the Ammonites and went to Rabbah, which is also in Ammon, and besieged it. But David remained in Jerusalem. Now, there's something going on here that we need to recognize. Some of you may have already kind of went, something's here. The people of Israel would have gotten it. We need to get it as well. Those first words, in the spring, at the time when kings go off to war, are almost an exact quote of 2 Samuel 10. 2 Samuel 10 says, when everybody else went off to war, David had an affair with Bathsheba. David committed adultery with Bathsheba and then had her husband Uriah, one of his mighty men, killed. The chronicler's not going to tell us about it, but he wants to remind us of it. He wants us to remember that David remained in Jerusalem. And he's saying, you know what? It's not our battle. It's never been about our power. It's never been about our goodness. It's never been about our righteousness. The battle belongs to the Lord, okay? David was not perfect. We're not going to talk about it and highlight what he did wrong, and you know the story. But David is doing something really bad while Joab is controlling it, and Joab attacks Rabbah and left it in ruins. David must have showed up at some point because we're told next that David took the crown from the head of their king. Its weight was found to be a talent of gold, 75 pounds. That's amazing. And it was set with precious stones, and it was placed on David's head. He took a great quantity of plunder from the city. Okay, so now Ammon is there. They are giving plunder. They are giving tribute, and it's all there. And David basically has control of this entire area, all right? He has control of all of this area. It's just an amazing thing. The last part we come back to is Philistia here, right? He starts with Gath. He wants to end with Gath. Starts, and he talks about 3 battles. Just going to talk about the last one real quick here, just a minute. Just to, again, show you how it kind of wraps things up. And still another battle, which took place at Gath. Think Goliath, right? There was a huge man. Wow, this is really similar, isn't it? Little difference. With 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, he had troubles in school, 24 in all. He also was descended from Rapha. No idea why we told he had 6 fingers on each hand and on each foot, but he had 24 digits, okay, for whatever reason. And when he taunted Israel, Jonathan, son of Shemaiah, David's brother, so David's nephew is Jonathan, right? Shemaiah's the brother, David's nephew. And again, think about it. This is not about David. This is not his nephew. This kid, this punk, killed him. When God fights, it's done. Okay? They were descendants of Rapha and Gath, and they fell at the hands of David and his men. It's never been about our power. That's the end of chapter 20. And so David has given security. The promise of God has come true. This is now basically really all of this area is the kingdom of Israel. And they have a home, and they have peace. Remember this map from the beginning? Israel is now this. Israel is now this, from the Euphrates down to the Red Sea. So what do we learn? Let's wrap it up. What do we learn? First, and this is, it's never been about our power, friends. The battle belongs to the Lord. The Lord gave David victory wherever he went. It was the Lord, it was the Lord, it was the Lord, and it is still the Lord, the Lord, the Lord, friends. And for those of us who are fighting battles, what we need to remember is that it's not a question of if God will win, it's only a question of when. It is not a question of if God will win. And that means, it doesn't mean we don't have any pain, right? When we're in the midst of struggles, when we're in the midst of difficult times, when we're struggling with the brokenness and the hurt and the injustice and the pain of this world, it's really tough to say, but I know, God, you're going to win. God doesn't always win on our time. But I know this. I know someday he will. And what that means, and I think this is, again, a powerful attitude for our witness, is that we as followers of Jesus Christ can live with a calm assurance that it will be okay. Okay? As we go through stuff, as I go through stuff, as I deal with the difficulties and the struggles that I face, as you deal with the ones that you face in your family, in your neighborhood, in your workplace, with your health, whatever it is, when we look at the brokenness of our world, we don't have to get upset and angry. We've got to fight. We'll talk about that in a second. But the battle belongs to the Lord, okay? It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And the time we spend here on this earth is so small compared to eternity that we can stay strong. It's never been about our power. The battle belongs to the Lord. And then our calling second is to fight bravely and remember it all belongs to God. I said it earlier, I said it again, fight bravely. We are not called to win. Our job is not to guarantee victory. I know that's tough because, again, we want to, right? But I see too often what we do is we get in and we say, well, if they're going to fight fire with fire, we got to fight with fire, right? How many times don't we hear that? Fight fire with fire. They're playing dirty. Those opponents of ours, they're playing dirty. We got to fight dirty. No, we don't. We got to fight bravely. We don't have to worry. When God decides it's going to happen, friends, it's going to happen. When God decides it's going to happen, it's going to happen. And it's not because we were so brilliant or we were so good or we were so powerful. It's because we fought bravely. So yeah, we fight and we care and we cry and we weep and we struggle and we bleed and we do anything we can to bring in God's kingdom. But the results are in God's hands. And all that we have is just in His hands as well. All we have is dedicated to the Lord. It's never been about our power. And our calling is to fight bravely and to remember that it all belongs to God. So as you go through this week, I want to just challenge you. When you find yourself in that struggling place, when you find yourself saying, I don't have what it takes, I can't make a difference on this, I can't win this battle, take a deep breath. R-E-L-A-X, relax. Get ready to do what you can. But remember that the battle belongs to the Lord. Let's pray together. Father, remind us of this every day and every moment of every day. We get caught up and we see the challenges and the enemies and the difficulties and the pain and the struggle, and we say we can't handle it. And I think because we're right, we can't. So remind us that it's never been about our power and it will never be about our power. Father, show us your power. And remind us that when it's time, all things will be made new. So give us courage and patience. Help us to fight bravely and well. And help us to trust that you will do what is right in your eyes at the right time. Give us that faith. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.